Would you like to discuss?
We did the rule plan change.
Yeah, no, like, there's some things I didn't grasp from the staff.
We started here.
Michael, there's a couple of points there. Andrew would like to ask you.
Good to go. Sure.
Yes, sorry.
Right, welcome back. Let's reconvene our meeting and we are up to 10.6. We're on page 170. This is noting the submissions that have been lodged on behalf of council for the last 6 months. Lisa, hand it over to you and Francis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon, councillors. So yes, as Mayor Helen said, this report is just a table submissions that have been made over the period from the 26th of November last year through to the 9th of March this year. There's a total of 10 submissions attached to the report. These have been prepared by a very wide variety of staff, as well as Councillor Bell, who prepared the submission on the principles of the Treaty Waitangi Bill on behalf of our council. So really just wanted to take this opportunity to thank all those involved. So Richard Hills, our council senior policy planner, he provided the feedback to Heritage New Zealand's consultation on their statements of intent. We had Ash, Axel, Kimmy, myself. Yeah, there's been a huge team effort in putting this together. So just wanted to take this opportunity to thank all those involved.
Thank you. So that is an amazing amount of work that's gone into those by a number of people, but also for elected members to go through them and make sure that we're okay with that. And I think the process works really well. So thank you for that. Is there any discussion on the actual submissions? Otherwise, we can go to the recommendation page 170. Councillor Campbell.
Will you ever get any feedback on our submissions?
We get one back saying thank you for your submission.
Yeah, that's about it. Although in saying that, we do, I'm just aware of the one I'm presenting this afternoon on the wastewater performance standards. We've actually, had some initial discussions with Taumata Arawai, which Hamish will talk to later. But that's really encouraging. They actually want to work with us on drafting those performance standards. So, by doing this kind of work, it does really open those doors and those opportunities. So I definitely think that the investment we make in it is worthwhile. Yeah, sometimes more than other times. But
yeah. I thank you for that. And it is a reasonably new process that we put in place to manage what we should and shouldn't be submitting on. So it works well. So thank you, Councillor Ford.
Yeah, just want to say thank you very sincerely for some outstanding work being done, outstanding submissions. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to my colleagues. I'm not involved in that. Yeah, outstanding work.
On that, would you like to move the recommendation on that page 170?
I'd love to. I'd like to move that the council receives and notes the listed submissions lodged on behalf of the Manawatū District Council between the 29th of November 2024 and the 3rd of April 2025.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hadfield. Any further discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Right, we now move to page 243. This is the deliberations for the Development Financial Contributions Policy.
What was that again?
It's just a quick one. Right, this is continuing in the process that we've had with our submitters. We've had a couple of workshops looking at the feedback, and then this is formalising the deliberations. So, David, hand it over.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon, councillors. So this is the deliberations report. You'll recall that a few weeks ago we had hearings for the Development Financial Contributions Policy, and we also have had a couple of workshops over the last month diving down into quite a lot of detail that that some of those submitters had made. So I'm not going to go too deep into the theme because I think councillors will well across those. Just to give you a summary of the overall feedback we got though from written submissions, 38% of submitters supported option 1, which as we recall is basically keeping the settings of the policy the same, where all of the future projects are kind of allocated to growth. So that's the one where I think the DC for fielding urban would be about 53,000. Option 2, 57% of submitters supported option 2. That's the one where the DC for fielding urban would drop to 37,000, but there'd be a 0.4% rates impact in 25-26. And neither thing where some people supported neither option, 5% can basically didn't indicate a preference. To be honest, the feedback really just boiled down to a couple of main points. One, for option 1, it was just a feeling that people didn't want more cost pushed onto ratepayers. That was pretty much the summary of most of the feedback. Option 2, it was a very strong developers thinking that if we put the price up too much, it would be a disincentive to development and would be uncompetitive compared to other councils. So that's
So just probably a couple of things. You will have noted that there was corrected financial information sent out to yourselves. The rationale for that was that because interest rates have come down and cash rates also come down, then the team recalculated the interest on borrowing, and that is what's brought down the impact on, if you like, rates to 0.4. But as you recall, the proposal that we put forward was not to increase rates, but to fund that first year from the Resilience Fund and some interest. So it's actually not a 0.4% increase in rates. It's just that 0.4% out of that those resilience funds, which was our solution of keeping rates where they were. You may also wonder why we have moved to deliberations today and then straight after an adoption. We had a meeting with our lawyers who were very strongly of the view that the fees that we could associate with development contributions had to be as near as possible to the ones that we consulted on. So what that effectively means is that you adopt the DC policy today, the new fees will come in to effect tomorrow, and then we will be going out as part of our fees and charges to increase DC fees come 1 July. Now we have little choice. We have quite a lot of legal exposure if we were to bring the 1 July figures into the adoption today, because it's not what we consulted on. So that's how we've structured it the way that we have. So I think that's probably all I've got. Questions?
And there's just one other thing I want to note, which is paragraph 2.6. I just noticed we pushed through some updated numbers, I think on Tuesday to councillors, which have been reflected in the adoption paper. I've just noted in paragraph 2.6 that this didn't push through to this report, so I just wanted to note. I think we talked about an extra 0.15%, which should be like 0.40 to cover the extra, it's actually 196,000 rates required. And then we also have a figure looking at the year 10 of the long-term plan, which is $1.63 million in paragraph 2.6, and it should be 950,000. So I apologise for that, and just push through on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Can you say that again, please? I could barely hear.
Oh, sure. So we pushed through updated numbers on Tuesday to finance a little bit of recalculation of the numbers. I just noticed it hasn't; those updated rates numbers haven't pushed through into paragraph 2.6. So in this report, we flagged that we'd need an extra 0.15% rates to cover the change, now 0.40. Remembering that in the consultation, we actually flagged the number 0.91, so it's well under still what we consulted on. To cover the extra, and it's $196,000 rather than $73,000 in 25-26. And the last number that's changed is in year 10 of the long-term plan, an extra was 1.63 million, and it's now $915,000. And that was just with the from that change.
Thank you. We still need to note that when we get to the next item. So, councillor Ford.
It's going back one to 2.5. Can we confirm that that's an error? That the 38,000 should be 53 or something?
Yes, it is. You're right.
Anything further regarding deliberations? Otherwise, there are two recommendations, page 203. You need to consider and approve before moving on. Councillor Ford.
I move one, that the council receives this report and the submissions received on the draft development of financial contributions policy, and two, that the council considers and makes decisions on the matters raised in submissions and by officers on the draft development of financial contributions policy.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Short. Any further discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Right, so that takes us to 10.8 on page 215. Noting that the table on page 252 has been updated. So, David, is there anything in this that you want to highlight, or do you think we've covered it all?
I think we've covered it all. There is one other change. I'm living last year. So recommendation 7, of course, the fees will become effective on April 2025 on 24. So sorry about that. It's a tricky set of recommendations, but pretty much if you support option 1, you'll be agreeing to recommendations 1, 2, and 7. And if you agree with option 2, you'll be agreeing to recommendations 3 through to 7. There's lots of ands and alls in the recommendation lineup.
Thank you. And the other thing to note, and I suspect it would come under recommendation 7, that would be effective from the 18th of April 2025. And in discussions with what the Chief Executive has just said, that again, we look at fees and charges. So I'm just wondering, for transparency, whether we need to add into that and subject to any changes to fees and charges from the 1st of July. For the sake of transparency.
Yeah. If you're going to put it in, I think it needs to be a separate note.
Okay.
Because that paragraph specifically about these fees being adopted. And then you probably need to put a note that says the council acknowledges that the DC contribution fees will be considered yearly as part of the fees and charges review.
Subject to any changes. Yeah. I just think from a transparency point of view, anyone in after July going back to this meeting will say, but hang on, you approved it at X and now you want Y. Right. Let's open it up for questions, comments. Councillor Ford.
Just, recommendation 6. Could you just explain that a little bit clearer? I'm just not 100% clear on what it says.
Yeah. So paragraph 6 is important.
Page 253.
It helps us to comply with section 77. So if you make any changes that kind of significant in terms of the consistency with the long-term plan. Yeah, councillors need to note it, otherwise the decision won't be valid. So this note here is that notice of inconsistency. All it's saying is in the LTP projections, the capital expenditure amount that is actually tagged to growth is now shifting to, some of that is shifting to capital expenditure associated with levels of service. And if you remember, that's what option 2 is based around. So
It doesn't say growth, so it's
additional demand, we could change that to growth, which means the same.
From capital expenditure growth to capital expenditure
yeah,
level of service.
I get it now, thanks.
I don't understand. Okay, any further discussion? Councillor Corey.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I don't support option 2. Fully support option 1. Developers are there to make money. That is their business, is making money out of developing sections. It's like saying to farmers, we'll subsidise your business, your transport or whatever. That's part of their business. And developers are certainly in that field. They have to be aware of the cost structure that's involved in it. If the cost goes up for a certain part of a development, then either they wear it, or they charge for it, or they reduce the purchase price of what they've done. So that is the underlying factor. They are in that business to make money. And by us then charging ratepayers, subsidising them by ratepayers, we're helping assist in their profit making. And I object to that. Now, the comment's been made that it will hit development for a 6. There will be no development in Fielding. There are 2 points to that. The first one is that we've also been told that there could be up to 5 or 6 years of development already in the system. So this is not going to change things overnight. It's already in the system. And any smart developer would have made sure that was the case. So it's not going to stop development tomorrow. The second point to that is 45% of the development within the Manawatū district is in the rural sector. Their price increase will be about $4,000 or $5,000. So we could call it minimal. So their development won't be too badly affected by this increase in charges. So it won't knock the building sector for a 6 in the Manawatū when you look at those two parts. The point you made about the first 450,000 is coming out of the Resilient Fund to pay for the charges for the first year. We didn't vote for a Resilient Fund to put it into building development. We've had problems up in the north with adverse weather effects. And it was voted to set up a Resilient Fund to fund any future adverse effects that we have on our district, not to help building developers. So I object to that. The point made is that most of the money thereafter is going to be charged to the urban ratepayers who receive that service, i.e. the sewage, the water and footpaths and so forth. Now, the rate increase, because only half of the district receives those services, the rate increase for them won't be just a flat 1% rate increase, it'll be 2% because only half the district is paying it. So the effect on poor Mrs. Smith is going to be quite substantial. And we've heard in the past how poor Mrs. Smith is paying a fortune for rates. She's one of the highest ratepayers in the country, the top 3. And here we are doing something exactly opposite to what we've preached for. Now, we changed the roading differential because the rural sector was receiving the benefit of the rates that the urban sector paid for roading. So we altered the differential. It's a bit hard to argue against it. But here we are doing exactly the opposite, in that we are subsidising one sector of our community at the expense of the others. The percentage that we pay, 75% is to be DC funded. Now, that figure was purely plucked. Okay, it could have been 90, could have been 85, could have been 80, could be 70, could be 50-50. There is no justification. There are no figures to justify that 75%. It was purely plucked out of the dartboard. Yeah, that's probably enough for the moment.
Thanks.
Yeah, so,
Thank you.
yeah, so if I have any other frameworks coming up, I'll speak to those.
Can I please ask for clarification on the accuracy of the first comment that councillor Quarry made?
And the last.
Yeah.
And the what's in the middle.
Everything in between.
My understanding is the reason that we went to option 2 was that we asked the team to go away and do some more homework when it was first suggested that we double DCs, and we asked the team to go away and do some more work on it. And my understanding is they went through item by item all of the growth expenditure, and in that process identified that legally there were some items in there, which is how you get your 75%, that technically were not direct growth costs. Therefore, technically should not be on the developer, and which is why we've come up with option 2, which are saying that those are renewal costs rather than direct growth costs. Is that correct?
Almost. So it's just 2 components. So there's renewal, but also increased level of service. So that's what the team went through project by project, identified a level of growth and renewal within each project, and the balance was growth. And then for the end, as it happened, I think it was 70-30 is closer, I think.
So it is still fair to say, therefore, having done that exercise, that we are now comfortable that all growth-related costs will be charged to the developer, which is how development contributions work. And the non-direct costs, renewals and increased levels of service, are a ratepayer cost.
So it's not really subsidising
No.
PCs. What it is identifying that in the growth projects, there is a component of renewal and levels of service that should be paid for by rates.
Correct. And that's why I was just wanting to correct that first statement, because it's not technically correct.
Oh, you heard it.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you. The DC payments in the past have always been growth related, 100%. And that's in the time I've been here. There's never been any indication that the means in which they were charged has changed. Now, if we look up to the precincts north of Fielding, none of that would be required if it wasn't going ahead. All right, there wouldn't be new parks, there wouldn't be new walkways, there wouldn't be new stormwater drains if it wasn't going ahead. So therefore, it must relate to the introduction of the new suburbs. The second point I'd like to make is that my wife's an accountant, just to be clear on this, and there were 3 accountants went for a job. The first 2 were given figures and were asked to explain how or what the answer is. The third accountant said, will you tell me what the answer is to be and I'll make the figures fit. And that's exactly what I believe is happening here. You can make the figures say whatever you want to. But in the past, for the last 100 years, DC contributions have been solely paid for by the developer. And that's been the argument put forward. It is all DC new services that are being paid for.
David or Shane, do you want to respond to that? Like, for me, the difference is we did the exercise item by item.
Yeah, that's that. And, you know, there might be some merit to what Councillor Quarry is saying, because it is the fact that there is growth occurring that is requiring these programs. That's not to say that when the projects go ahead, there's not a level of increased levels of service or renewal associated with them as well. So,
Yeah,
it's both.
I think when in the
approval to consult paper. We discussed that a little bit, where we said if it's a philosophy really, depends where you come from, but if you think that all the projects in that Schedule 2 are created by the need to grow, but there'll be components of each of those projects that actually provide some positive externality to the community as a whole through increased levels of service or renewals. Depending on where you come from, if you support option 1, your view will be these projects would have never been initiated unless place grew. So therefore, ratepayers should pay for that. Sorry, developers should pay for that. Option 2, if you think that if you say, yeah, those projects would have never been initiated unless growth happened, but there are positive externalities which increase levels of service to the general community, you can subscribe to the view that the ratepayer should pay for that increase to the level of service to the community as a whole. So it's a bit of there's no right or wrong answer to that. And I guess that's why elected members, it's in your court really.
Councillor Ford.
Yeah, just on that, so I'm used to work as a valuer, and that same joke about accountants was applied to valuers as well. What would you like the valuation to be? Yeah, hilarious, isn't it? I mean, everyone just rolled around in laughter. Well done. You should be stand up. Anyway, so my understanding is that, exactly as David finished off there by saying neither answer is wrong, both are right. So it does depend how you see it. But we also got some advice from Simpson Grierson, I understand, and basically when DCs first came in, councils by and large saw it as an opportunity, right, let's get the money off the developers. They can pay the whole lot. And that's what we've done up until now. And then more recently, councils are taking a more nuanced approach and saying, well, actually, we've probably been a bit tough on developers in the past, and there's a strong argument to justify why some of that cost should be put down as levels of service that everybody enjoys and renewals. So, there was that legal advice that came in that sort of helped me justify the change. The 104% increase, I don't care what it is, but that's just unacceptable. We've gone from one of the highest DCs around and then more than double it. It's just, no matter what you're trying to sell or do, that's just doesn't wash. And that has a huge effect on developers and development. And of course, there's a relatively small and finite number of developments and developers, whereas the effect on the ratepayers is, I'm going to say it's minimal, might argue, but because it's spread over so many people. And I can justify it because everyone does benefit from development. And if we're not growing, we're going backwards. And, a number of us have experience being involved in civic and community matters back in the 80s and 90s when we were going backwards. And the population was declining and businesses were closing, property values were dropping, businesses were closing, potentially another dying rural town. Last one out, turn out the lights. We've been down there, and I can tell you we don't want to go down there again. That was an awful period of time. So we do need managed growth, and we do need development, and we do need developers. And I certainly thank the team for providing us the options after when we went back and said, well, 104% is too much. Came out with 16 options. It's great. And then we've fine-tuned it down to 2. We've received some really good quality submissions, particularly from the development community, who also showed a real positive willingness to work closely with us, which I think we've all agreed we must do. And that's why I believe that the only realistic option is option 2.
Thank you. Councillor McFedgin.
Thank you. Where I struggle with this is, this whole argument is that we hear that it's good for our communities. And for me, that's based on the assumption that, for me, that the more users to pay for the assets, the cheaper it gets. The problem we have is that when we've asked the question, no one can quantify what their benefit is in financial terms. It seems like we're budgeting for the development contribution, but we're not offsetting it in our long-term financials or our assumptions around what the rate increases, that increased volume of users to spread the cost, which should arguably reduce the rates. Now, I understand that that may be too difficult to do, but so then I sort of mentally am trying to factor that in when I look at this, at these two offers or two suggestion recommendations. I agree that we can't go backwards. I'm also not where I am unsure is that the government has already legislated that, said that they're going to change the whole way that development contributions are funded. Not a lot of detail. And effectively, if I understand it, that they're going to effectively apply the development contribution cost onto the future ratepayers by way of a targeted levy. So to me, it's a little bit like, if that's the case, and the fact that we've already sold, out, we pay those development contributions of 5 or 6 years, it's very difficult to sort of really get a clear picture of where it's all heading. But we have to do something. So I am going to support option 2 on the basis that I do believe there'll be some savings, and I believe that we need to make sure that we hold the council, hold us all accountable to deliver some of those savings given to us by volume.
Thank you. Councillor Underwood.
When Councillor Quarry mentioned before 75-25, 7-Eleven is saying 44-56, is that correct? So the ratepayer is almost paying half, 44% to 56%?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that it's going to be funded by general rates is what I have an objection to, because you may say that all ratepayers benefit from growth, but when it comes out of general rate, the ones with the higher value properties are going to pay more of that amount, and they are the farmers who are further away from where all this benefit is. So they're going to benefit the least, but they're going to pay the most. Is that correct?
No, there'll be a fixed amount in the general rate.
A fixed amount, targeted amount for,
Just an amount.
yeah, for everybody. Thank you.
So following that up, is it correct then to say it will be a general rate, or should we be saying it's a targeted rate?
No. It's very difficult to put it into a target manner, and I've had some quite interesting conversations about this, and really, it only place it really fits with our rating system is in that general rate.
So that's the uniform charge? No, the general.
General rate is just a general rate. It's just an amount that everybody gets charged.
Same amount per every property will have the same amount. Not based on the property.
Yeah, it will be based on.
No,
It's the set amount. That's what we're asking. Is it general rate based on property value, or is it the same amount
Uniform charge.
for everybody?
So it's uniform.
Have to check. I'm pretty sure it'll be general rate based on property.
Because if it's general rate based on property, then councillor Underwood's point is valid.
Well, we've got to get the money from somewhere. It's got to be rates.
Correct, but it's how do you do that? Like,
I thought only those that paid the full town services were to be charged for it. It wasn't to go to, oh, I've got cream just.
You haven't said no enough today.
Keep quiet. I thought it was only those that received the services, i.e. the urban people that receive those services.
correct.
Why should a hill country farmer at the back of Rangiwai here pay for the footpaths and
Exactly.
in,
Recommendation 3 says funded from general rates.
I might have got there right. I think general rate is capital based.
Is what?
Capital based.
Everybody pays it.
So everybody will pay it, including the farmer at the back of Rangawahi.
That's true.
And they'll pay more because it's based on their property.
But you're not talking a lot of money. You mean, so, it's 0.4, which is 196,000 spread over the whole rating base.
they shouldn't be paying a cent.
No,
What would it be if it didn't include rural communities? What would the figure be? If it was just in the road, so benefit from road.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is a road.
Councillor Hayfield.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. So just for clarification on the general rate, I'm looking at our rates here. So general rate there's a rate charge for field and residential. So I'm assuming that the rate charge for rural is quite different to the the field and residential. So yeah, so if I look at the rate charge here, it's 0.00102,000. Not that that means a hell of a lot, except that there'll be probably a few more zeros in front of that one for the general rate rural compared to field and residential. So the other thing we've got to consider when you look at that is that we always have this debate about who pays what and who pays what, but I think sometimes we actually forget that we are actually a community, and there's a cost to living in a community and being part of the social infrastructure of a community. And I think, quite frankly, if we're going to start, and this sort of thing, and start picking this and picking that, I mean, I can go down the bloody rates thing here, for residential compared to rural, and I think I'm probably slightly more entitled to choke on the peppermint than perhaps you are, Councillor Quarry. But but you might like that. But there's a cost to living in society. We've got to make this work the best way we can. So on that basis, I'm going to support option 2.
Councillor Blackmore.
I just want to clarify a point that councillor McFadden raised about not quantifying the value of growth. And I'm just remembering back to every time we look at anything that impacts rates, we're doing it with the annual plan as well. When it comes down to what is it overall, we have a minus growth figure.
Correct.
So we could potentially quantify that. And it's often around 1.5, 1.8 or something. So it's not as if we don't do that work. I think it is there. It is somewhat of an assumption around what growth there actually is, but it's not absent.
I don't, my answer.
Sure.
I don't think it specifically covers the infrastructure that we're talking about that's depreciated. And because I did ask that question and Amanda, and she did say, look, we can't quantify what that figure is. So if she could quantify that figure, she would have referred us back to the point you're making.
Yeah, I suppose my overall point around that is actually, if we weren't allowing for growth and investing in it, we wouldn't be able to take that 1.5 into consideration. So even at a very arbitrary kind of statement about there is some benefit of growth for everyone, that could be it.
Yeah, it could be, but I'm just saying, I just asked, was that specifically, could they actually define specifically what that was? And the point was that they couldn't. But it's also subjective as to how quickly those developments are sold, taken up, all of those things.
Yeah.
But it does have a positive effect. It does have a positive effect on reducing everybody's overall rates, the effective volume.
Well, like others, I've written kind of arbitrary statement I'd like to throw out to the world on my position.
Sure.
Okay, so at the time this policy was redrafted, I was in support of the approach for option 2. This approach, to my thinking, also considers the requirements of the legislation regarding attribution of cost more widely, given that the benefit of growth is experienced by the wider community. This perspective was reinforced by submitter lawyer John Key, who pointed out the relevant legislation to us during those hearings. Since the policy was drafted and put out for consultation, I believe there's been two significant changes in context that require consideration. The first is that the government has indicated a shift to development levies using the phrase, ensuring that those who are responsible for growth pay for growth, which seems to be in opposition to what lawyer John Key reminded us of, but it's an incomplete statement. The indications are that this change would be effective in 2027 with a transitionary period to follow, meaning that the changes could be 4 to 5 years away. The second is that there is currently significant global financial instability and shifting world order, which threatens to plunge us into recession again. And when I considered this, it reminded me that developers will always have a choice to do what they do. They weigh up market forces, costs, margins, and uncertainty before committing to any investment. The cost of development contribution being one of those factors. In contrast, our ratepayers do not have a choice. Our decisions commit them to a cost, which they will be required to pay under the same circumstances of global financial instability, regardless of employment or income. So I have wavered on which opinion I believe to be the most appropriate under the current circumstances. However, we have had multiple submissions from developers requesting a forum whereby council and developers could work together to bring down the cost of infrastructure investment and improve processes. So with this in mind, I still support option 2 as the best interpretation of the current law, the fairest, and I'm also hopeful that option 2 will decrease the overall cost of growth for council. And as such, we can get the cost of Schedule 2 and associated DCs and rates down.
See? 2.
Mutual admiration. Body.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thanks. Well spoken. For me, I think it's a policy trade-off between affordability and equity, as we've discussed. Option 1 obviously favours equity with the growth, the growth pace of growth. It's not particularly affordable for developers and there's a risk of slowing the growth. Whereas option 2 favours affordability for the developers and spreads the cost across ratepayers, but it does raise that fairness to the community. I mean, but it's also important, again, as we've discussed, about considering the growth environment and growth forecasts. And we have got an economic slowdown at the moment. And high DCs at the moment could, very seriously damage to development, which I believe we don't want. So I'm favouring option 2 because I think that offers a pragmatic balance that recognises the current market we're working in at the moment, and it aims to avoid any stalled growth due to high cost of development. And also, I think it would assist to aid our relationship with the development community, which we desperately need to support our growth. So I'll go for option 2.
Shane.
I've just spoken to Amanda, so we completely got it wrong. So how it's charged is that the component that relates to water is charged through the water target component. Same with roading, same with sewer. So if you're not paying that rate, i.e. rural, you don't get charged. And the only one that might be a little bit different will be stormwater, where there is a wider stormwater impact, and it might be through capital. But Amanda said you might be able to help with that one, Hamish.
It's an 80-20 split, the 80% being effectively targeted, the other 20% being across on a capital
basis. Yeah. So that's how the rating will apply.
Did that make you cramp go away?
Yeah, it did. So that means that anyone who's not receiving those services doesn't pay. Yeah, so those additional charges will go directly to the urban dwellers. The other point could I make is that
Resilient stormwater.
except
Which
for
is-
20%.
Well, that's, yeah, that's,
which is an 80-20 split.
yeah, and that won't be a biggie. The Resilient Fund was set up about 3 or 4 years ago. And it was set up for natural disasters that happen upon the Manawatū. This is not a natural disaster to dip our fingers into the pie and rob it to pay for this. Now, 450K should go to those that are using the service. The Resilient Fund was not set up for this. And it shouldn't be used for this sort of event.
Shane.
So there's two bits to this really. Because the options here don't talk about how we might use the resilience fund. What the options are talking about is the rates of PAC versus the DC amount. How we fund it, that's a conversation for the annual plan as to whether we add to the rate percentage or we find another way, the resilience fund, to offset that 0.4. So it's quite it's an annual plan conversation rather than this, because whatever we do here, it's a rates impact. How we pay for it later is an annual plan.
But doesn't that come into effect as of tomorrow?
But it doesn't change your fees and charges.
No, just
It's just how you fund your rating component,
how you fund it.
which is an annual plan conversation.
So that's a discussion. When we do fees and charges about how you want that.
Annual plan discussion.
Well, as long as the Resilient Fund is retained in the form that it is.
Yeah, what we're saying is that's the discussion to raise them about how we fund it.
Policy around the resilience fund, do it on decision by decision basis.
Councillor Ford, you have your hand up?
I suggest we have an offline conversation, councillor Quarry. Because I don't think we're supposed to talk about some things now.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. I'll be supporting option 2. I've certainly watched over the years as development contributions have increased all around the country. They've been controversial in some districts, not ours luckily. Some have been taken to court, and then the government's reviewed legislation many times, as they have again. I just wanted to comment to Councillor Quarry that not all developments are by developers. A lot of them, your Mrs. Smith having her urban section in town, or who's farmer, or Fiona's farmer who's behind on the mortgage and wants to cut off a couple of sections. They're not all, while they are obviously trying to make a little bit of money, they're not necessarily doing it as a business, is the point that I was making. And I don't know what the percentage of sections being subdivided in our district would be. Professional companies, property developers versus private individuals doing the developments. Developers shop around, they know what's happening in the region, and if we become more expensive than our neighbours, then they will go to our neighbours. They'll stop developing here, and they'll go to Palmerston, or they'll go to Ringatepe, or they'll go to Holyfield. And that's what I'm concerned about. We've had good economic growth the last few years, through a lot of it being through the hard work that people around this table now and prior to us have done. I hate to see the handbrake go on, and I absolutely acknowledge that we've got high, particularly urban rates, but we also know through our local water done well conversations the reasons why that is, and I think now all our neighbours can see that, that's why Manawatū's rates are so high. Look where they are with their infrastructure. So I'll be supporting option 2.
Thank you, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Richard. Similar, on echo Councillor Short's statement that not all developers are developers. So from an EU perspective, we hope to make a settlement within the next 10 years. And I see in the future that Ngāti Kōwhira will want to develop not for profit, but so that they can bring people home and we can live here in our own district. And I feel like option 2 will enable that for the valley and for Kōwhira. So that is why I'm going to support option 2. And further to that, in my presentation early this morning, when I put up one of the buildings that we visited, which was Hikono Hitūwhare Tour, part of how they got to have that whenua and that building was working collaboratively with council. Part of that is capital contributions and DCs. Those are the mechanisms that enabled them to do what they needed to do. So that is one of the reasons why I'll be supporting option 2.
Thank you. Councillor Underwood.
Thank you. If I could just confirm then that the table 3 on recommendation 5, when we're talking about the 0.15% total rates increase, that's 0.15% total rates pool.
So yeah, so that's been
That table's
based
been
on
upgraded.
that new information you got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from that total rates pool, it will be distributed as you said. So not every ratepayer's rates will go up by 0.15%. It'll be distributed under those targeted areas.
Rates and through that coastal.
And the schedule 2 referred to in the document, is that handy? Can we get access to that something?
It's in the, it's in the, yeah.
It's in the policy.
It's in the policy, is it? Okay, thanks.
Right, so if that is the discussion, does someone want to test the room with the recommendations? Councillor.
Shall I do that?
You could if you like.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't need to read it all out, either.
No, you don't need to read the tables.
Probably wipe it off your computer.
That'll be the first time this year.
No longer need that.
Some sort of great conversation.
We've got time for peppermint break.
Page is the recommendation, what?
250 they start.
You want to go to page 252 on
Or you
the top of your
or
computer
option
or
1
page
on
250.
250 or option 2 starts at number 3 on 251.
No.
Option 3 on 251.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, that's, you put one you're gonna do. That one?
Yes.
So you need to read those.
Yeah.
So
Start with 1.
if you're looking to start for option 1,
Yeah.
it's on page 250, 1 and 2.
Okay, I'd like to move that the council adopts the development and financial contributions policy. Option 1, the costs of all schedules in Schedule 2 future assets of the policy are regarded as a growth related and are fully funded from development contributions. And 2, that council sets the development contribution fees per housing unit equivalent HUE by catchment area as
Here's the table.
as the table below.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Don't all put your hands up.
It appears you may be missing one.
Councillor Baskin on that?
It was Steve. I need Steve.
Right.
We've lost contact with our people.
No seconder.
Now,
So what happens now?
So make it second.
Council Ford.
Right, so if I do the other one, option 2, I read 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, is that right?
Correct.
All
You
of
don't need to read the tables.
Okay. I'd like to move the council adopts the development of financial contributions policy, option 2. The costs of projects in Schedule 2, future assets of the policy have been assessed as either growth related, levels of service related, or renewals related. The growth-related costs are fully funded from development contributions. The levels of service-related costs and the renewals costs are funded from general rates. And 4, that council set the development contribution fees per housing unit equivalent, hui by catchment area as table 2 below. And 5, the council notes that the indicative increase in rates required would be in accordance with table 3 below. And I do note that that is the amended table 3 that we received last night and today, as opposed to what was in the original order paper. And 6, that the council, to comply with the requirements under section 77 of the Local Government Act 2022, notes that option 2 would create inconsistencies with mandatory financial impact statements in the council's 2024 to 34 long-term plan. This option would result in $17,363,234 being reallocated from capital expenditure. I'll just put growth in brackets there to meet additional demand into capital expenditure to improve the level of service across the 10 years of long-term plan. 7, that the council agrees that the development contribution fees resulting from the adoption of the development and financial contributions policy will be effective from 18th of April 2025. Note that the council acknowledges that the development contribution fees will be considered yearly as a part of the annual fees and charges review. The next review is scheduled for June 2025, with the updated fees to take effect from 1 July 2025.
Thank you. We have a mover. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Campbell. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No,
Would you like the vote recorded?
yes, I would.
Thank you. At least as a council, we can. It would be a lot different in other councils. Have discussion and vote. Right, so with that, we get to no late items. Just noting 9.1, we're not going to go through them all, but just acknowledging the community committee minutes that have happened since our last council meeting, our youth council, and also Orion Hapu liaison. So acknowledging those minutes are on the website for you to read. So with that, we can move to item 12, and I will move that the public be excluded of the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely the confirmation of minutes. So the seconder, please. Councillor Ford. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you.